The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
Welcome from the General Assembly and the City of Richmond. I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports and Cox Communications. And a very warm welcome to our special guest, Senator John Miller, representing the 1st District. I think you've got about 200,000 constituents. You can say hello to them now.
Well, it's always good to say hello, not only to the constituents, but especially to you, Woody. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Let's start off with what's going on in the Senate. There have been a few controversies there this year, unlike last year, of course. But give us the lay of the land in terms of redistricting and how that could potentially impact you and some of your colleagues.
Well, let me give you the good news first. The Senate has passed my bipartisan redistricting bill by a vote of 33-7.
That's very good. Congratulations.
Thank you. It traditionally passes the Senate. It runs into problems in the House. But we've got to get the redistricting pen out of the politicians' hands and give it to folks that can draw districts that make sense. It just doesn't make sense to me to have folks who have a vested interest in the outcome drawing those lines. And we saw a great example of that last week. On Martin Luther King Day, there had been a bill that had been on the calendar that had made technical adjustments to House of Delegates districts across the Commonwealth. And this is mainly uniting precincts that had been split.
So that was a bill that had come over from the House of Delegates.
It had come over from the House, and it dealt primarily, 95% of it was House of Delegates districts. There were 4 Senate districts that were affected, but again, very minor changes of uniting split precincts. It had been on the calendar since the 2nd day of the session. It had been passed by every single day until we got to Martin Luther King Day. And
it also happened to be Inauguration Day, as I recall.
It was Inauguration Day, and one of our members was up in Washington attending the inauguration. And so instead of a 20-20 split, it was 20 Republicans and 19 Democrats. And they took the occasion. Senator Watkins offered a substitute, and the substitute was a dramatic gerrymandering of almost all the Senate districts across the Commonwealth. And it dramatically changed my district. My district, I would, if the plan goes through, would no longer represent Williamsburg, James City County, Hampton, Suffolk, and in exchange, I would pick up Prince George County, Isle of Wight, Surrey, Southampton. I'd lose a third of my precincts in Newport News. So it was a massive rewrite. It was done without holding a single hearing, without one person in Virginia knowing what the plan looked like, no public input, but they had the votes, and they did it. That is no way to redistrict. There ought to be massive public input, and the plan ought to be available for everybody to see, but it is what it is. And so now there is sort of this redistricting cloud hanging over the Senate, and I would hope that the House would pass my redistricting bill and get a bipartisan commission, and that's the right way to redistrict. But I would hope that everyone would urge the governor to veto the bill if it gets to his desk, and let's redistrict. The Constitution says you redistrict in Virginia in years ending in 1. This clearly isn't a year ending in 1, and so it should be on the face of it unconstitutional.
Well, we're well into the 45-day 2013 short session. I believe crossover occurs next week.
Yes.
You're going to be busy this week, and of course even busier when the House bills land on your desk. And I know there are a lot you're interested in, not the least of which relates to K through 12, especially 3rd grade reading.
Right.
Talk to us about the importance of reading at the 3rd grade level and the implications.
Well, as you and I have talked on several occasions, 3rd grade reading is the key to a great education. The 3rd grade reading test is really the greatest predictor we have of success in school. If a student passes that test, there's a 95% chance they'll pass the 5th grade reading test and they'll be successful. But if they fail, there's a 50% chance they will fail the 5th grade test and they will fail school. In Virginia, the pass rate on that test, the goal that we have as a state is to have 95% of the students pass. What in reality is happening is about 82% are passing that test. That's about 16,000 third graders failing that test every year. Half of them are going to fail school. So that's 8,000 kids on a pathway to prison. If we took some time, some effort, and some money and really invested in third grade reading and made sure every child could read in the third grade level at the third grade, we would be saving the money we spend on remedial education in Virginia, which is about $500 million, dropout costs, juvenile detention costs, prison costs. We would save massive amounts of money if we really addressed the third grade reading problem. So a year ago, I had a study that the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Committee did on how we can improve third grade reading. It was a massive blueprint on steps we can take. And one of their recommendations was to reduce the number of SOLs that we give in the third grade.
Standards of learning.
Standards of learning. These are comprehensive tests. In the third grade, we give 4 SOL tests in reading, math, science, and social studies. And these test knowledge from kindergarten through third grade. So a third grader is tested on more knowledge than they're ever going to be tested on the rest of their academic career. Only 6 states test that much in the third grade. And so the study says reduce it to reading and math. Concentrate on those two core subjects. And so last year I had a bill that did just that. And it passed the Senate with strong bipartisan support, but ran into some problems in the House. And this year, what we're going to do is call for a study in 16 localities across the Commonwealth. Let's, for 2 years, take some children in the third grade, give them 2 tests, have a control group and give them 4, and see if it really makes a difference. I think it will be a game changer and really dramatically improve the reading and math. We're still going to teach history. We're still going to teach science. Right. We're just not going to have this comprehensive end-of-year test. And the time that is devoted to teaching to the test, we can use to improve math and reading skills for our students and give them a good foundation to be successful in school.
Now, what role does early childhood education play in the success at the third grade level?
Well, it is really critical, as you know, that if we can get a child in the pre-K program and give them the skills that they need to be ready to learn when they get to school, it dramatically improves the success of children in school. So there is a great case to be made for expanding pre-K education, but then once they get into school, to really ensure to be successful, to make sure that they can read in the third grade level.
Well, I think, as you had mentioned to me at a previous occasion, K through third grade, you learn to read. Thereafter, you read to learn.
That's right.
I think that encapsulates it. There's also some issues around childhood obesity that you are working on. Tell us about that.
Well, you know, this is probably the first generation of children who are not going to outlive their parents.
Not going to outlive their parents.
For the first time in history. It is an increasing problem. Virginia ranks 15th in the number of obese people in the state. Obesity is the biggest problem in southeast United States, and so we've got to take some steps to address it. And we've done some things like making lunches in schools healthier, getting rid of unhealthy snacks in the vending machines and sodas and those types of things. But we really need to continue to make strides. And what I have offered is a bill that says every child in Virginia, K through middle school, will have 30 minutes of physical activity every day. Not physical education, but physical activity. And so it isn't hard to do. It doesn't cost, you don't have to hire a PE teacher. And some schools are doing some very innovative things. In Hampton, at every class, they take 5 or 10 minutes and they get up and they walk around the room or up and down the halls. Walking to school would count for the 30 minutes. So would recess in schools that have recess. But unfortunately, not all schools have recess. Right. Some schools have got stationary bikes in the library. So as the children are reading, they're also pedaling. Those types of things we can do at very minimal cost just to get kids active. I chair the Virginia Compact on the interstate educational opportunities for military children. And we had a retired general come and speak to us about childhood obesity. And he said the Pentagon had done a study in the last couple of years, and that 75% of young adults 17 to 24 are unfit for military service.
Three-quarters of them.
Three-quarters of them, primarily because they're too fat. And so obesity is now a national security problem. So we've got to address it, and this, I think, it is not the answer, but it is a small step in the right direction to get kids up and moving and at least some physical activity every day.
Now, you mentioned cost. I assume they're minimal. What kind of resistance have you received to this initiative?
Well, the resistance is there's no time in the school day, and so you're going to take it away from core subjects. You're going to take it away from the fine arts and that sort of thing. And you know, when we went to school, we had recess.
We did.
And we went out in the playground and we played for 30 minutes or more. And we need to get back to that. It's a common sense thing. We certainly need to take care of the mind, and we do that, but we also need to take care of the body. And so we have asked schools to do more and more and more, and I understand that. And I think at some point we're going to have to lengthen the day because the requirements we put on schools continue to increase. But taking 5 minutes out of a class to have kids, you know, walk around the halls and get active, I don't think that's a great imposition.
Right. And of course, we continue to ask more of our teachers, who are some of our unsung heroes. I understand part of the governor's initiative would grant a pay raise to teachers.
Well, the rules are changing on that. It grants a pay raise, a 2% pay raise to some teachers, not all teachers. Those who are involved in the standards of quality would get the raise, but others would not. And I think there's an unfairness there. That if we're going to give a raise to people, we ought to give a raise to everybody in the building, and not just some. And the other part is, it is a raise only that is contingent on us having money in the budget at the end of the year. So it's going to come from savings from other agencies and such. And so I don't know how school districts can plan on that, because we won't know until June whether the money is actually there. So we have not paid our state employees a raise in several years, and they deserve a raise. And the fact that they're still with us and doing the good jobs that they do is very commendable. But I would hope that we would be able to give all of our state employees some sort of a raise. We've given a couple bonuses along the way because we've had some savings at the end of the year. But a bonus is not a raise, and I think these folks deserve one.
Absolutely. Some of those teachers use their own funds to purchase supplies for the classroom even.
My mother's 80, she'll be 86 next week, and she is still a teacher's aide in the elementary school
really?
I graduated from. And it's remarkable, but the amount of money she spends out of her pocket just to provide things that the school division doesn't pay for is remarkable. And so these teachers spend a lot of money. We don't pay them a whole lot, and then they have to go and dip into their own pocket to help pay for supplies, and it's just not right.
Now, I understand there's been an agreement reached about changes in teacher contracts. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. There has been ongoing negotiations, and the governor's office and the Virginia Education Association and everybody has come to an agreement, and everybody has sort of signed off on it. And so they'll make some changes in the contract and how long somebody is under review and that sort of thing. So it is nice when all the parties can come and agree and have peace in the valley.
Makes your job a whole lot easier.
It does, because it is nice when we're not having to pick sides, and it's much nicer to have both sides agree to something than impose something on one side or the other.
And of course, attracting new teachers to the Commonwealth, the governor has suggested using Teach for America.
Yeah, this is a program that in schools that are hard to staff, they would bring these folks in and they would commit to teaching for a couple of years, and we need to do more to encourage our folks to get into teaching, and we need to make sure that we have the teachers for the future, and so I would think that if we could give them some sort of tax credit or other incentives to come in hard to teach or hard to service areas, rural areas, and that sort of thing, we need to reach out and incentivize folks.
What about the move to give jurisdiction to the State Board of Education, the applications for charter schools versus the local school districts?
Yeah, there are a couple bills, Woody, that are usurping local control, and that's one of them. And I think that schools are best run at a local level, and the folks in Newport News know best how to run their school system, and not have the state come in and usurp their power, be it a charter school. There's also a proposal that if a school is not reaching accreditation for 4 years, the state can come in and just take it over and give it to a private, for-profit group to run, or however they deem best to try and turn that school around. I would hope that the folks in a locality would see a school struggling, for 2 or 3 years at a time, and sort of demand some sort of changes. But I don't want to open that door where the state can just come in and now the state is running what should be a local operation.
Of course, the other legislation that causes a lot of angst, because it requires a delicate balance between the continued encouragement of tourism and commerce versus the ability of a school district to set its opening date, is back before us like it usually is, and only God knows where it's going to go this time either. But where is it in the Senate now?
Well, we'll take that up this week, whether or not to allow school boards to set their own calendar. We really don't have a policy in Virginia. There are 132 school divisions. Almost every one west of Interstate 95 can open whenever they want to. It's just the school districts east of 95 that are under this restriction.
That's because there's a waiver for school districts.
There's a waiver, and a lot of the waivers were based on weather, and so they needed to open early because they had to close down during the harsh winters and where kids couldn't get to school. But it has grown, and so almost some 90 districts, I think, are exempt from the requirement to start school after Labor Day. So you really don't have a policy. But for 4 years, my first 4 years in the Senate, I believe that we elect people to run the school districts. They set the calendar. They know when Christmas vacation is, and so they should have the authority to decide when school starts. Then under redistricting, I represented Williamsburg and James City County, and that's a great tourist area and very dependent on tourism. And the head of Busch Gardens came to meet with me and sat in my office, and he said, if you change the law and you let schools open before Labor Day, I'm going to have to fire 1,000 people in August.
That many? Wow.
1,000. And this was a year ago. Remember what the economy was a year ago. And so I asked the State Board of Education, give me the test scores for schools that open before Labor Day and after Labor Day for reading and math. And there was virtually no difference, a tenth of a percentage point between the two. And so I came to the decision at that point that if it really didn't make a difference on test scores when you opened, I wasn't willing to have 1,000 of my neighbors lose their jobs in a very tough economy. And so I voted to keep school after Labor Day.
What about the potential to allow those students who are schooled at home to participate in athletics, the Tim Tebow initiative?
Well, it came before us last year, and it's coming back, and I have been serving on the Virginia High School League, which sets the rules for high school sports. I'm opposed to the Tebow bill, and I will tell you why. The bill we had last year, there are 13 criteria that a student in public school has to meet in order to play sports. In the Tebow bill, it would be only 6. And so there's a disparity. If you're going to play sports, somebody ought to meet everybody ought to meet the same criteria. But more fundamentally, when you make a decision to homeschool your child, and that's a perfectly valid decision, and public school isn't for everybody, but those decisions have consequences. And so if a child isn't going to go to public school, then they ought not to participate in public sports or drama or the debate club and those sorts of things. So the argument's often made, well, I pay taxes to the school, so I should be able to use the facilities. Well, I pay taxes to the school. I have no children in public school anymore, but does that give me a right to go use the auditorium and throw a party? It doesn't. So I'm going to vote against the bill again this year.
I want to focus on transportation for
Sure.
a moment, but I also want you to talk to us a little bit about the importance of the ports. They are obviously a vital link in our transportation throughout the Commonwealth. And as I understand it, those ports are going to play an even more important role as of 2015, because the Panama Canal will be widened and we will have these huge container ships coming into our ports.
Well, the ports are our largest economic engine and a vital asset for our economy. And as you mentioned very correctly, Hampton Roads is the only port that can take these super containers that will now be able to pass the Panama Canal because of the depth of our channel. All the other ports have to dredge, and they're doing that, so the advantage will be short-lived. But for the short time, we will have an advantage because we can accept these huge ships. There's a couple proposals on the table to change the ownership operation of the ports.
To privatize it.
Privatize the ports, and the port community is against it. It is not a good idea from their standpoint. It's not a good idea from my standpoint. The proposal is to let a shipping company run the ports for 48 years, and in exchange we get about $3 or $4 billion.
48 years, that sounds like the same deal that occurred in Hampton Roads recently with the public-private partnership and the tolls over a long period of time.
A long period of time, and it's just a bad deal. $3 or $4 billion is a lot of money, but over 48 years it isn't that much. And the General Assembly, interesting enough, has no role in these public-private partnership deals. The Midtown Tunnel, we have no say. I introduced a bill that said, when a public-private partnership reaches $1 billion, like the port deal or the Midtown Tunnel, the General Assembly ought to have a say in that. And so I had proposed that let the governor negotiate the best deal they can, then bring it to the General Assembly. And we vote up or down on that deal. We can't make any changes because you don't want 140 folks messing with negotiations.
Right.
But that was defeated. But we have no say. And the governor can't be reelected, so he'll be gone. And the people that make the deal are not elected. They're appointed by the governor, and they'll be gone. So who do voters hold accountable? Nobody. So I thought, for just a good government and an accountability standard, let them hold the General Assembly accountable, and if it's a bad deal and we approve it, then you got somebody to yell at.
It's kind of interesting because the General Assembly does have complete authority over Menhaden fish.
Yes, yeah, we're the only. It is amazing that we are called on our expertise to run a fishery, but we can't. We have no say in the greatest economic engine that we have.
Well, continuing with transportation, obviously, once those goods reach our ports, they have to travel our roads, our byways, and our railways, and transportation is back again in terms of finding a consistent, reliable funding source, and the governor has a proposal on the table that I know you have a reaction to.
I do, and I commend the governor for putting a fairly serious proposal on the table. In past years, we were going to use offshore oil drilling revenue when that wasn't a possibility, and we were going to sell the ABC stores to try and raise money for transportation. One year we took out a credit card and charged $4 billion on it. But now there's a proposal. I have some concerns. The first concern, the governor does away with the gas tax, 17.5 cents, and replaces it with an increase in the sales tax. My feeling is that most people are thinking, well, this is a good idea. The gas price is going to go down 17.5 cents. That's not going to happen.
I can't count on that.
You can't count on that. If it goes down 4 or 5 cents, that'll be a big deal. But the gas price is going to be relatively stable between Maryland, Virginia, and North Carolina. North Carolina has 20 cents more in gas tax, but the price of gas in North Carolina is within pennies of what it is in Hampton Roads, within pennies.
Wow.
In North Carolina, the roads get that 20 cents. Mm-hmm. In Virginia, the gas companies get that 20 cents. So I think there's expectations that the price of gas is going to go down. It won't. The second thing is it doesn't raise enough money. We're $1 billion short every year, and the governor's plan doesn't raise nearly that much, around $700 million. So that to me is a flaw. We're only going to do this once. We're not going to come back year after year and negotiate a way to fund transportation. So whatever we do has got to stand for the next 20 years, because that's how long it's going to take before we come back to address it. So I think we need at least, the mark that I've set is at least $1 billion. And the third problem with the governor's plan is he is relying for a third of his revenue on passage of a bill in Washington that Congress hasn't passed in a decade, and that's taxing internet sales.
Okay.
So if they haven't passed it in a decade, what's to lead us to believe they're going to all of a sudden say, oh, this is a good idea, let's pass it now? And without that revenue, the governor's package shrinks even more. We've got to address transportation. We're in a crisis. We're going to run out of money to construct roads in 2017. So we've got to do something, but we've got to find a realistic, dedicated, and sustainable source of revenue. You know, most of the people I represent say raise the gas tax. If you raised it 10 cents, which would still be half of what it is, you know, in North Carolina, half of what the difference is, that's $500 million right there. And I do believe that transportation is a core service of government, mm-hmm. and that some money from the general fund is appropriate, that the sales tax from cars and tires and auto-related expenses ought to go to transportation, not to the general fund, and there ought to be tolling at the interstates and on the borders. You know, those things can get us to $1 billion, and they ensure that those who use the roads pay for the roads.
So lots of work yet to be done. I'm sure this will be fully vetted in committee very quickly and on the Senate floor.
Oh, absolutely. You know, the governor has his plan. Senator Watkins has a plan also, and so you know, at the end of the day, I hope we can meld those plans into something that really, you know, makes some sense and gives us the revenue that we need.
Great. Well, thank you for being with us today, Senator John Miller, representing the 1st District.
Thank you, Woody.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.
Mm-hmm.